Hi, I'm Pirie Jones from Sun Valley, Idaho. Now, why is it important where I'm from? Because I want to share with you about my community. Sun Valley, Idaho is an international destination. It's famous for its skiing, near-perfect weather, and of course, its history. But soon, Sun Valley will be known for something else, and that something else is suicide. How many of you have lost friends or family members to suicide? Raise your hands. There's a lot of you. Well, here are just some of the faces that my community has lost. Jacob, 13. Lane, 17. Speedy Jarrett Peterson, 29. And Caleb, 40. Now, over the past couple of years, I've created wellness festivals around the country. And last September, I graduated from a 2-year master's program in spiritual psychology from the University of Santa Monica. The day after graduation, I received a phone call from a girlfriend telling me that one of our friends had died by suicide. Now, you notice I didn't say committed suicide. And that's the reason why, because people who are suicidal do not desire death. What they want is an end to their severe emotional pain. And they think that's the only way to do it. After I got the news, I was devastated because my friend who died was also the life partner of a great girlfriend of mine. She was part of the girl tribe. It's one of us. And I was devastated. So with this news, I knew I needed to contact my children. They were at school. Because you see, I didn't want them to hear it from anybody else but me. Caleb was also a friend of theirs and a skiing mentor. So I dug deep because I knew this was going to be a very difficult conversation. So I called the school and I talked to my children. My son was shocked and stunned, but I could feel the pain through the phone. And my daughter was equally as stunned. But then she said these words, "Wow, Mom, I guess suicide around here is becoming normal." I was frozen in silence. How could this be? We lived in a beautiful community. We live in an amazing community with nature surrounding us, healthy lifestyle, art, music, education. We care for one another. But when I came back, I realized that something had ignited inside of me. I knew that my life path had changed forever. So I flew back home from LA the next day, and I dove headfirst into trying to understand this phenomenon that had become my new normal. So I started studying the statistics and the data of suicides in our country, the state of Idaho, and our community. What I found out is that Idaho is part of what's called a suicide belt. It's the northwest region of the United States where the suicides are much higher than the national average. And there are about 10 states that make up the suicide belt. The suicide deaths in Idaho per capita, according to a report in 2015, is 57% higher than the national average. And then the suicide deaths in Blaine County were 17% higher than Idaho and 67% higher than the national average. Now, can you believe there's a 300% increase of more suicide deaths in Idaho than New York? Or that Outside Magazine recently described that our country's ski resort towns have the highest suicide rates. And Time Magazine recently came out with a report from the Center of Disease Control and Prevention stating that teenage deaths between the ages of 15 and 19 are at an all-time 40-year high. Suicide deaths among teenagers have doubled, and they've also risen among our teenage boys by 30%. With numbers like these, it took me a long time to digest them. So the question that came to me was why? Why is this happening? Why are we in an epidemic? After much research, I found out the answer is depression. Most teenagers go through depressive episodes that can last for 2 weeks or longer just during a low emotional point. The problem is they think this feeling is permanent. Their frontal cortexes are not fully developed yet, so they don't know that a feeling can change. Also, there's a rise in teen depression, but there's not a corresponding increase among mental health treatment for our kids. With these numbers, I also decided that maybe we ought to start with kids in our schools. So that's what I did. I contacted Kevin Hines, who's a suicide survivor. Kevin had prolonged depression throughout his teenage years, and he was feeling less and less hopeful. So what he did 20 years ago, at 17 years old, while his father was at work, he sat down and he wrote a suicide note. And then he decided to take a bus to the Golden Gate Bridge. Crying all the way, he did make one promise to himself, one decision, that if just one person would come up to him at the bridge and ask if he was okay, he wouldn't jump. Sobbing at the bridge, he saw a woman. She was walking up. He was hopeful. But instead, as she walked up to him, she asked, "Would you mind taking a picture of me in front of the bridge?" as tears were streaming down his face. His heart broken. Remember, he only needed one person to show they care. They didn't, and so he jumped. The minute Kevin said as he let go of the railing, he wished he didn't. As his body hit the water, breaking almost every bone and sinking to his death, something rose up underneath him. A sea lion. The sea lion kept him buoyed up above the water until the Coast Guard arrived. Kevin describes this now as the luckiest day in his life. After recovery, he soon understood that his life did matter. And so he began sharing his story all across the country, saving one life at a time. Well, Kevin came to our community last February, he and his team. And he spoke to every middle school and high school, every 8th grader and 12th grader. And then we had breakout sessions where he could actually talk to the kids one-on-one. They absolutely loved him. He was so authentic. And then what he did is the kids asked him, what are they feeling? What are they thinking? Tell him their struggles. And they did. They opened up and they were vulnerable. And they shared with him the struggles about alcohol and drug abuse, cyberbullying, cutting, domestic abuse. He listened. So Kevin and his team decided that they would talk to them one-on-one. And they did the risk, and they figured out which student was in trouble. And some lives were changed. So after Kevin left, he wrote up a report. And he gave us some suggestions how we can start the healing process in our community. And so with a few community leaders, what we did is we got together once a month and we discussed how can we lower the suicide rate in our community. And as you can see from the chart, we had many different people around the table. We had policemen, first officers, first responders. We had doctors, nurses, hospital administrators, school administrators. And this was led by our local hospital in town. Now, the first thing that we did is we asked ourselves, how could we intervene and help? And then what we did is we assessed the risk and protective factors. And we found out the 3 areas that our community needed help the most. One was mental and health disorders. The second one was alcohol and drug abuse. And the third one was history of family trauma and abuse. So what we decided to do is to focus on our teenagers in the schools, because they were the key setting for suicide prevention. Private struggles, on average, happen in the hallways of our schools. Let me give you an example. A student leaves home having a traumatic and difficult experience and comes to school. So what sets in is the stigma. because they're saying, what's wrong with me? Then from the stigma comes the silence. And then it becomes increasingly more difficult to ask for help. Now we think if we train our teachers and all school personnel, these are the individuals that integrate with our children the most during the day. Our kids are in school 8 hours a day. A teenager dies by suicide at least 2 hours in the U.S. And for every young person who dies, there are 100 to 200 attempts. So how can our schools take action? Number 1, promote national well-being and connectedness among all students. Connectivity is the key. So instead of saying the old adage of, I'd rather not get involved, you simply don't have that ability anymore. It's unacceptable. We need to get involved. We need to start with our kids. The second thing is conduct the mental screenings. Now, this is an evaluation of kids' emotional and mental health, and it can be done by a mental health provider. The third one is integrate school-centered education in the curriculum, perhaps in the K through 12 in their health classes. The content would include healthy choices, coping strategies for mental and emotional health. And then the fourth one is implementing peer-to-peer training. And this is where student peer groups are actually designed to help find the kids at risk in schools. And then lastly, how many of you know how to talk to someone if they're in crisis? Raise your hand. How many of you don't? That was me a year ago. A vital tool that I learned from many health providers is that if you believe a friend or family member is in crisis or contemplating suicide, you ask them, you be direct, and you say, I care, but I'm worried. Are you contemplating suicide? And they will tell you. And the follow-up question is what's your plan? Again, they will tell you because they want to know that you care. Lastly, is you do not leave them alone. You tell them you want to help and you help them right away. Whether it's taking them to a facilitator, to a suicide counselor, or just making a call to the crisis hotline, you stay with them. You could save a life by your words and actions. Now, let me be clear. I'm not a suicide expert. I'm a woman and a mom and a community member who cares. We must stop this epidemic. So I'm asking you, will you be the sea lion? Get involved in your community. My takeaway in this TedX talk is to let you know, in order to decrease the suicide rates in our country, we must get together and take care of each other, love one another, show compassion. Our communities all want to be strong. And the 3 words that the National Suicide Organization encourages us is to ask for hope, give people hope, ask for help, and give each other strength. In closing, if anyone out there is in crisis, or you know someone who is, please take notes of these 2 numbers. One is the National Crisis Hotline. Also, the second one is the Idaho line. You can call or text, and I guarantee you there will be someone on the other line who cares. We must move and heal from our past and move into a healthier future. We all deserve it. And so do they. Thank you.